In this Modern Excel webinar, we're going to look at advanced data preparation techniques with Power Query. My name's Ken Pulse, and I'm going to be the host for this session. So before I dive into today's content, I'll just take a second here to introduce myself. I am a fully designated accountant in Canada. I hold the CPA and CMA designations. I've also been recognized by my accounting society with a fellowship, which is an honor that's awarded to those who try and advance the accounting profession. I run a little website called excelguru.ca where we have a full website full of knowledge-based articles, a blog, and also a free help forum as well. I'm one of the founding partners behind skillwave.training, a site that is dedicated to bringing you good quality BI training so that you can get the most out of your data. We focus on things like Power Query, we focus on things like dimensional modeling and Power Pivot and Power BI. So if you're into those areas, you should definitely check out our offerings. I've been in Microsoft MVP since 2006 across a variety of different categories, 10 straight years with the Excel group and then in the data platform group that looks after Power BI. And I'm now back in Office Apps and Services, which again is the group that now looks after Excel as well. I'm a software developer and an author. I've written a software package called Monkey Tools, which is an add-in for Microsoft Excel to help with your business intelligence modeling. And I've also written the book M is for Data Monkey along with my co-author Miguel Escobar. This is widely recognized as the book on how to use Power Query with Excel and Power BI. Now, for this webinar, I want to show you a few different advanced Power Query techniques. But I'd actually like to do it in the context of a real-life business case. So we're going to work with Power Query. We're also going to look at some Power Pivot along the way here to try and go and actually solve a business issue. So the case that surrounds this business issue here is actually based on near real-world data. You're going to see some data that's been made up on the financial side because I can't share real data. And I'm also going to show you some real-life data around some different pieces that we're going to use to actually prove our point here. Now, it's based on data for a golf course. And one of the things that happened when I was actually in a golf course looking after the finance is that we would go through and we'd report our sales and we'd send them to head office. And then head office would come back to us and they would ask us and say, listen, why are your August sales down $37,000, for example? What's going on with that? So naturally, in the golf industry, the first thing that we would do is we'd come back and we'd say, well, it's because the weather was terrible. It rained, no problem. Always blame the weather. That was our number one rule of thumb. And that was okay, except that, eventually after you tried to, bust that reason out quite a few times, there would be some skepticism along the way. And then head office would come back and say, well, can you actually prove that out? Was the weather really bad the entire month? We say, well, no, it wasn't bad the entire month in August. It was just 3 days of rain, and that was what killed our entire monthly profit. They say, 3 days? Come on, we don't really buy that. Can you prove it? Well, the challenge is that this becomes a little bit more challenging, right? We can sit there and we can certainly blame the weather. That's easy. When we look out the window, is it sunny? Is it raining? What's going on? But what happens when you don't track the data? And this was a real big issue for us because what we tracked was we actually tracked our sales transactions. How many tee times were booked? How many golf carts were rented along with the green fees that were sold? How many beers did people buy? Things like that. All of those items were tracked. But the stuff that wasn't tracked that we didn't have control of was the weather. We never recorded that information. How much rainfall? How windy was it? What was the temperature like? That wasn't stuff that was captured in our point of sale systems. Should it have been? Maybe. But was it? No. The second issue that we ran into that we had, first off, we didn't track the data. The second one is that maybe the data that we did track was actually in kind of a messy, nasty format. So if you've got that, how do you go back and take all this horrible, nasty data that's in a gross format and then try and compare it to data that you don't even track? How do you actually make that happen? So what we're going to do today is I'm actually going to go and use Power Query and Power Pivot to do exactly this because I actually have the tools now that I can actually solve these problems. So here's the data that I'm starting with. Here's my business issue first off. I have $837,000 worth of revenue for August 2019. But the budget was $875,000. So we're missing about $38,000 worth of revenue in our shortfall. So there's the question. Why were the August 2019 sales so bad? what I'd really like to do is I'd like to go back and actually compare the weather in the last 3 Augusts, 2017, 2018, 2019 at this point, to go and see whether or not there are any emerging trends in the weather. If there is, I'd like to mash it up with my sales versus budget data to see if they correlate. Now, I have sales data. Here's a nice little table of the 31 days of sales information that we can see here. And I also have the budget worksheet that the accountant used to go and actually work out what the total budget of $875,000 was. Now, the way that they've put this together is kind of ugly. They've worked out what the estimated daily revenue is for a Sunday, a Monday, Tuesday, and so forth all the way to Saturday, and then counted how many individual days there were in that particular month, multiplied those through to come up with a grand total. So this is kind of ugly, but you know what? At least I've got it. Hopefully it should work. What don't I have? The weather data. But you know what? I actually found someone who did. I did a really quick Google search and actually came up with this little website called Environment Canada, which happens to go and actually track the weather data. So if I were to go and take this link that I actually picked up and jump over to Edge here and go paste this in, what you'll see is that I actually get a daily data report for this specific period. So right now, June 2020. And if I scroll down the bottom, you'll actually notice that we've got all of this data in here for June, all the way up to June 22nd, which is yesterday. So that's all cool. But what I'd like to know is, can I get the data for previous periods? So at this point, I'm going to take a little bit of a look at the URL here, and I notice that it's got a few things. Station ID. Now that's probably pretty important because this is the weather station in Nanaimo, British Columbia that I'm looking for. It's also got this month equals 6. And I'm going to say, well, I wonder in that case, and I see day equals 1 and years 2020, what would happen if I went back and changed this to go to 2019? Notice now we've got our June 2019 daily data report, and sure enough, we've got a bunch of information down there for every day in June. So that looks pretty cool. Would it work for something like August? We hit enter, we come back with August data, and we can see that we have August information. So that looks pretty useful. The next thing that I want to look at though is when I'm reading this URL, I can see that we have the entire URL up the front, then it goes to a question mark, station ID equals this, and month equals 8, and day equals 1. I've really got to wonder with my monthly data if I need to actually capture this day piece. So I'm just going to cut this out. We'll go month equals 8 and year equals 2019. And if I hit enter now, we can see that it still gives me the same information. So this is one of the things that I want to see when I'm playing around with Power Query tables on the web, is that if I can just capture that information, I should be able to dynamically feed this and get back the pages that I want. So I'm just going to copy that. I'm just going to go and paste this guy right back here for right now. There we go. And that looks good. I'm going to come back to that a little bit later on. But what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with actually creating the easier data sets first to drive my stuff. And then I'm going to go and build in the more complicated parts a little bit later. So let's do this. We're going to start super easy. There's absolutely nothing advanced about what I'm going to do here. I'm going to click inside my table of sales transactions. We can verify that it's a real table because the table design tab comes up. And what I'm going to do is now go to data and choose from table/range, and I'm going to pull this into Power Query. This is the real easy stuff here. The only thing that I'm not really super happy about in this case is that I don't really like the data types that have been set up from Power Query right off the bat. So I'm going to change my date to be a date. We'll replace that one there. And I'm going to change my sales to be a currency and replace that as well. And that's basically it. Now, you don't really have to change your sales from decimal number to currency, but honestly, I prefer to because that way it forces it to be a maximum of 4 decimal places, and that's a little bit more efficient for the data model. Even though it only shows 2 in this case, it will carry up to a maximum of 4. Decimal numbers can have a huge fractional numbers behind them, which can actually affect your compression inside the Power Pivot data model. So at this point, I'm going to now go and say close and load. Now I've customized my load behaviors so that they actually load to connection only by default. Should you ever want to do that, you can go to Get Data, Query Options, and right on the main tab that actually comes up here, you can choose to specify custom load default settings, clear the boxes for both worksheet and data model. It will then load to connection only by default. I also always check the box for fast data load. It's not selected by default, and I prefer that, my data never tries to load slowly. So there we go. Some good stuff to get set up right there and right away. All right. Now, the next thing that I need to do is I actually need to pull in my budget table. And there's some challenges with this particular one, because when I go and select the range of data that I want to pull in, and I go from table, what happens is it tries to go and actually put a table style on top of my table. Now, the challenge is that this doesn't really lend very well to a table style. If I were to go and just put Control T to put a table on it for a second here and say my table has headers and say OK, you'll notice that it goes and adds all this row banding. Now, I don't really need that for this thing, and granted I could turn that off, but the other challenge is that it actually locks all of these things down so that they're no longer formula driven. Now, in my case, they're actually not formula driven right now, but that doesn't really matter. It just isn't necessary. The button indicates on the data tab that this is from table or range, but unfortunately, it's not letting me pull in from a range without going to a table. So I'm just going to press Control Z and undo this here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull this in without assigning a table style to it. I don't want the consistent, I don't want the locked in headers. I don't want the consistent formatting on the tables. I just don't want a table here at all. The easiest way to do this, select your data. We'll go up to the name box here where it currently says H14 because that's the top left cell. I'm just going to click right in here. I'm going to give this a nice little name like RNG budget. So that's short for range and budget. I'll hit enter. The important thing, no spaces in this thing, not allowed spaces. Once we've done that, you'll notice that it now has in the name box range budget. Now I can click away from it and it will be available right here. Range budget will go back and select that block of data. Now, if you've worked with named ranges before, you know that you can also set them up through Name Manager or Define Name. If you need to change them ever, you'd go back to Name Manager. And when we look at that, we can see the names of the actual tables, sales and months. That's the other table that's over here, as well as my range budget, which has a slightly different icon than the tables. So if I needed to modify it, this is where I would do it. But for right now, I'm happy that I've actually defined a named range over my data. And what you'll see is that this button now behaves a little bit differently. When I go to From Table, it just launches it directly into Power Query. And I can actually prove that out by grabbing this and showing you that, hey, look at that. No table style has been applied to the data. Everything looks good. And that makes me pretty happy. So the key thing to be aware of here, that button should actually probably be called From Table/Named Range, not just From Table/Range. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm now going to go through my nice little set of really nasty data here, and I'm going to convert it to get my weekly or weekday budgets. So there's a couple of columns in here that I don't really need. I don't need column 2 and I don't need week, but I'm going to show you something interesting about this. When I press the delete key, what you'll notice is that it actually codes a step called remove columns. Well, that's good and everything else. And what it means, though, is that if anybody ever inserts a new column into that named range and I hit refresh, that new column will show up in my data. I don't always like that. I like to future-proof things and really guard them down. If IT adds a new column to my stuff, I don't always want it coming in. I'd rather be told that, hey, there's a new column available. You make the choice. The problem is that there's no gear icon over here to reconfigure something. It's actually hard-coded it right inside the top here. So I'm just going to delete this step, and I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to go to Choose Columns. And when I go to Choose Columns, it gives me a list of all of the columns that I can work with. I don't want column 2, and I don't want week. And when I say OK, it now codes a slightly different step. It says Removed Other Columns. It also gives me a gear icon, which will allow me to go back and reconfigure this at any point in time. I actually prefer to code these kind of steps because it gives me that gear icon for reconfiguration. It means I don't have to hack the formula up in the top here with the M code. And the difference here is that it's actually selecting columns. So we could get to this in a different way. We could have selected all these columns and then done a right-click remove other columns. That will give us the same step. It's just a little easier to do it through the Choose Columns button, I think. But the nice piece here is that if somebody adds a new column to the data source, because it's not explicitly in this code, it won't bring it in, which makes me a little bit happier. So that looks pretty cool. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm now going to go and say, well, there's only one row that I really want out of this whole thing, and that is the estimated daily revenue row on row 20 here. So no big deal. I'm just going to go filter here. We're going to go to estimated daily revenue and say OK. And at that point in time, everything looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go and actually remove the budget column here. I don't need this anymore. So I'm just going to say delete, right click and remove. That will work as well. And then I'm going to grab all of these columns and choose right click. And we're going to go with unpivot columns. So this will unpivot every single column to give me an attribute and a value. The attribute, of course, is going to be something like day. And the value I'm going to rename to budget. And at this point, I might do something like set the data types here to be a currency as well, and then just rename the table. Instead of calling it RNG budget, I'm going to go and call it just plain old budget as well, because that's a much nicer name. And that's all I want to do to this table. I just want to get this back to the actual daily values that I'm looking for. So I'm now going to go and say close and load, which because of my customized load behaviors will load as a connection only query. With that in place, I now want to combine these two things together in order to make myself a proper transactions table. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. What I want to do is I actually want to merge these two tables together, but I'm going to need to do a little bit of work first. What I would never do is right click on sales and choose to merge. I don't really like this because it actually gives you one step that combines the two tables together. So for me, instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose reference. Now at this point, it'll open Power Query again, and we can see in the formula bar that I have a nice little formula that says equals sales. And if we go and open the Query Navigator pane, which is always here, by the way, you'll notice that I'm in a query called Sales2. I'm just going to double click on it right here, and I'm going to call this one Transactions. There we go. So it renames it on the left. It also renames it on the right-hand side in the properties window when you do things here. I generally tend to drive most of my renames on this side, only because I really like this pane. I kind of wish you could actually pin it open. Now, the thing is, I want to merge, based on this date, the budget information here. The problem is, this is text, and these are dates, and those things are not the same. So let's test the theory here about this thing where it says equal sales, because what should happen is if I make any changes to the sales, they should flow through into this table. So I'm going to go back to sales here for a second. We'll go to date. We'll choose to add column. We'll add a date column. It's going to be the day, and I'm going to choose to add the name of day. And this will give me my Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's pretty cool, except that I need to shorten this down so it's only 3 characters long. So I'm going to go to the Transform tab and choose Extract First Characters and extract the first 3 characters and say OK. I now have a beautiful day name column, and if I go back to Transactions, you'll notice that it has indeed flowed right in here. That's perfect because now I can go to my Home tab and I can say, let's merge queries. I'm going to merge this with budget based on the day name, and we have 31 out of 31 matches. Excellent. So now I can say OK, and I get this new little column here with this table, and I'm going to expand just the budget out of it. I'm going to uncheck this original column name as prefix. I don't need a column that's called budget.budget. That doesn't make any sense. And when I say OK, you'll notice that I don't get a column called budget. I actually get one called budget.1. This is a little bit frustrating, but the cool thing here is that I can actually just hack the formula up the top here really quick, get rid of that .1, and away we go. I think it renames it like that just to make sure that there's no conflicts in the tables, but unfortunately it doesn't really seem super necessary. I can now go back to the day name, which I no longer need, and I can go and press the delete key on it, and away we go. That looks good. Excellent. So I've now got a nice transactions table The final step that I want to do with this before I actually go and load it into the data model is I want to grab all of my columns here, and I'd like to set the data types. And there's a couple of different ways you can do this. You can pick them off one at a time, or you can try this. Select all the columns, transform, and go to detect data type. That will code you one step right away. Boom, it's nice, it's in there, everything's good to go. Except that while it made my date happy here, it's actually reverted my sales and my budget back to decimal numbers instead of dollar values. So I'm going to change this again back to currency and replace those. So this didn't actually help me in certain ways. It probably would have been faster to just go and recode them. But I do want to say as a pro tip, I highly recommend that the very last step that you have in any table that loads to a data model or to a worksheet is to reset the data types for every single column. And that way you'll never get into a situation where something changes earlier in the query and suddenly you get a variant data type that comes along, called an any, that kind of messes things up. Should that happen, sometimes dates can load as either numbers or text, but not dates. That's what you want to kind of avoid. The other thing that I want to call out really quickly here is just around the fact that I mentioned that I don't like to use the merge step directly from the Excel user interface. I prefer to reference and then merge. The reason being is when you look at your merged query step, it puts in code like this, table.nestedJoin, and it joins your two tables together. I can see that when I'm looking at my query step here. If I merged directly from Excel, these two things would be called source, and they would all be under one step. So it's not very easy to see that you've actually got two distinct queries here that are coming together. I think from an audit standpoint, it's much better to just reference the actual sales table and then merge the query steps separately so that you can look at the steps and go, oh, hey, look, it looks like we actually merged another query in here. Otherwise, it becomes kind of transparent and visible. At any rate, I'll go all the way back down to my change type now. Everything looks good. I'm happy with it. So I'm now going to go to Home, Close and Load To, and I'm going to override my default settings that I used to add this to the data model. But I'm going to leave it as only create connection. And what we should see now is that transactions will load, and it's going to load into the data model. There we go, 31 rows. We're all good to go at this point in time. So that was the easier stuff to start with. Now what I need to do is I need to go and actually pick up my weather data. So what I want to do is I'd like to grab this, and we're going to go and build ourselves a nice little custom function to be able to go and grab the weather from a variety of different places. But the first thing we need to do is we need to build that function. Why? Well, because I want to build a reusable function that will allow me to then say, hey, just take August 2017, August 2018, go and get me the data for each of those 3 months and append it all into one big long list to load it to the data model. I don't want to create 3 individual queries that are doing the same thing. That seems like a lot of extra overhead. To start with though, I grab that URL. I'm now going to go and grab some data from web, and I'm going to drop the URL in here. But we need to move into the advanced area to do what I need to do. So what we can see right now is that we have the climate, the weather data here, and then down near the end, we end up in this area here where we've got our month equals 8 and year equals 2009, or 2019 rather. I'm going to go and cut this, X. I'm going to come down here and paste this in place, and I'm going to add a couple more parts to this. I'm going to cut this apart, put this down here, and we'll cut this one off the end and put it here as well. So I'm basically breaking up the URL into 4 separate components. Now there is a URL preview down the bottom, and you'll notice that when you look at it, it still comes out to the same thing. So this is what Power Query is actually going to use for its URL. So even though I broke it into 4 parts, it still concatenates them all back together. Now that's good and everything else, but what I want to do is I want to actually make these items here not hard-coded text, but I'd like to make them dynamic. To do that, I'm going to use what's called a parameter. And to set that up, we're going to go here and say new parameter. This will open up our parameters list where I can give myself a nice new parameter. I'm going to call this one month. That sounds nice and descriptive. I'm going to change the type to make sure that it is text. When we're putting textual values together, concatenating into one big long string for Power Query, you can't use a value. It doesn't do implicit conversion like Excel does. We have to specifically tell it that, yeah, that number is actually text. So I'm going to set it up as text to make that a little bit more consistent. And I'll set my current value to 8. While I'm here, this tiny little new up the top here, I can create another new parameter. I might as well do this one here too. This is going to be year. Year is going to be taking a textual value as well, and I'll set this one up as 2019 to start with. We'll now say OK. And at that point, what you can see is that Power Query automatically goes in and injects a parameter for us. Unfortunately, it doesn't always get it right. No big deal. We can just change the drop down here to say month. And then I want to change this one to use a parameter as well. So I'm going to change, instead of using the ABC, we'll go to use just a regular parameter, and we'll choose year. What you can see in the URL preview down the bottom now is that when we look at this, we actually have our month and our year within curly braces. That means it's going to use the variable instead of actually using the hard-coded value. So now we'll go and we'll say OK. And at this point, it should load us into a nice little preview where we can actually take a look at what we have here. Notice that in the web view, it tells us that, hey, the preview might be dangerous. Would you like to see it? Well, I say, well, I trust this website, so sure, why not? We'll enable the web preview. And you'll notice that we actually get a picture of the web page. And as I scroll down, there is a green highlighted table here. This one here is a table that Power Query is suggesting that we should probably actually pick up. If I go and look at the table view, nothing's been selected. If I click on the daily data report, this was the highlighted green table. If I go to document, I can actually drill down and parse the HTML myself. If you really hate yourself, this is a great place to go and spend some time. It's really hard to do this kind of stuff, and I don't recommend it. You really want a document that has some nice table tags, although to be fair, this is an area that the Power Query team is investing in to give us some better options going forward in future as well. We've already seen some of those come into Power BI, and they'll eventually make their way to Excel as well. Now, I'm going to grab this table here. I usually prefer to do this through the table view, but the web view will work as well. And then we're going to go to transform data. And at this point, we will now be taken into our query editor. And you can see that I've done this in the past. So I'm just going to refresh this to make sure that everything's looking nice and current. And we can see that we have the nice table of data. Before I move on, I want to give this a little bit better name here. So I'm going to just go and rename this one. I'm going to call it a sample weather transform, because that's essentially what it is. This is going to be my template for building myself a nice weather transformation. So the way that I'm going to play around with this one here is I'm going to go and say, let's do a little bit of work on this. I'm going to go back and say, let's filter out and get rid of some values. The average, the sum, the summary, and the XTRM. Don't need any of those. That'd be the extreme. I only want the daily values. And at that point, everything looks like it's probably in okay shape. The thing that I want you to recognize here is that all of this right now, this whole piece with the sample weather transform, is actually dynamic. So if you take a look right now, for August 1st of 2019, the maximum temperature was 24 degrees Celsius. If I go back to here and I change this to be 2017 and go back, notice that the maximum temperature on August 1st in 2017 was 31 degrees, not 24. So you can see that we're dynamically making this thing actually work for us here. So that looks promising. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to create myself a weather function based on what we have here. And to do that, I can go right click and say, create function. So I'm right clicking on my sample transform. It says, what would you like to call your weather function? So I'm going to call it FX weather. And you'll notice that it also has already picked up the parameters month and year. This is why we did the work around the month and year parameters. And when I say OK, boom, just like that, we get a new little folder with all of our FX weather. It's grouped everything up for us really nicely here. So that's really cool. And it's given me this ability to go and do something called invoke my function. So in this case, I could actually come back and say, well, I'd really like to test this. So let's see what happens if we go to 8 and we go to, actually, you know what? Let's do a different one. Let's go with this one. Let's go with June 2019 and see what happens. If we say invoke, It creates a new query, and boom, just like that, we've got some interesting data along the way here. So cool. I'm just going to go here and right click, and I'm going to delete this for a second. We'll get rid of this one. Because what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually go and lock in this particular information along the way here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and say close and load, and we'll lock all these guys down just to make sure that they all get written into memory here. Now, that's perfect. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and say, let's see what we can actually do to apply this. For that reason, I'm going to go pick up my historical weather table because this has got the 3-month combinations that I'm actually looking for. So I'm going to go and grab from table at range. We'll pull this data into Power Query. Here we go. So we've got this nice little setup of data here. And now I'm going to go to add column. We're going to choose to invoke a custom function. So I'm going to try and apply my custom function to each row here. And it says, all right, what would you like to call this? I'm not really all that super worried about this one right now for the name, so I'll just leave it custom. But the query that I'm going to use is going to be FX weather. And it says, great, okay, what would you like to feed in for the month? I'm going to say, all right, well, let's go and feed in a column name. That column name is going to be month. And then for year, we'll go with column name, and we'll choose to feed in a year. All right, cool. So this should be 8/2017, 8/2018 that are being fed into these each row. When I say OK, you'll notice that we get errors. Going, what is going on? Well, if we click not the green keyword itself, this would drill down into the error where you see the little hand here. So I'm going to click the white space right here. And notice this says we can't convert the value 8 to type text. And this is what I'd actually mentioned a little bit earlier around the fact that we're trying to pass right now a value which is showing as a number into a text string. So that's not going to work. It doesn't like that. The problem that I have is that this has actually caused me some issues back here where I have my change type step. The automatic change type detection detected these as values, not text. So I need to replace these. So I'm just going to come back and say, you know what? We're going to go back. We'll change this one out to text, insert, and we'll replace the current step that changed it to a number. There we go, nice and textual. And then for the year, we'll go text, again, insert, and replace current as well. So my source step is now the table with variable data or variant data types. I've changed the type to be text, and now when I invoke the custom function, you'll notice that I get a nice little table back that has a whole bunch of information, and each one of these guys has information to work with, and they're all different, which is kind of nice. So I'm seeing some variation around this. But the challenge that I have here, there's a lot of data in here. And you know what? The only thing that I really care about in this is the day number and the total rainfall. That's all I really care about for this, because that's what I'm trying to measure. So let's strip these down. Rather than go and expand all these and start tearing away the columns in this view, in my master transform of months, which I'm actually going to rename and call this one here weather, because that's what this table is going to be about, I'm going to go back to the sample weather transform. And in the sample weather transform, I'm going to look at this and say, you know what? I don't want all these columns, so why don't we do this? Why don't we choose our columns, and we'll unselect all. We'll choose to grab the day and the total rain definition in millimeters. We'll say OK. There we go. So I'm going to go and just change the name of this column here, and I'm going to call this one rain in millimeters. And at this point, I'm going to go and grab both of these guys here, and we will set our data types. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do them individually. Let's set the day to be a whole number, and we'll set our rain to be a decimal number, because I don't know how many decimal places they may need. So there we go. So my sample weather transform, I've added a couple of steps to it. And now when I go back to the weather column and I take a look, let me just refresh my preview, make sure it's all coming in nicely here. Normally you won't get that if you're connecting to a data set for the first time, but I've done this before. So now we can see that we've got a nice changed transformation. That looks brilliant. All right, so cool. So let's go and do this. Let's expand this. I don't need the original column name as prefix. I should probably click load more just to make sure there's no other columns later on in the data set, which there's not. And then we'll say OK. And now what you can see is something very important has happened. Number one, it's actually gone and expanded the two columns. That's excellent. I'm really happy about that. But at the top of the rain column, notice this little red error here. This is actually one of the features for our data preview stuff, which actually goes on the View tab here. We have things like column quality and column distribution. Column quality will tell you what's going on, and it says that 2% of my data actually has errors. Although I can see that just in the fact that there's a little red bar up here. I don't really like to run with this thing all the time because I find it's a little bit heavy, especially when you turn on the column distribution that shows you how many distinct and unique values there are. So I usually turn these guys off because I can get that information generally when I select a column, like year, for example, that's all properly typed. You can see all that information down the bottom here. Now the challenge with rain is that something's gone wrong. There's an error here. Well, how do we actually find it? Well, you can scroll down and eventually what you'll see is you find right down here on row 55 that I've got an error. And if I click in the white space, it says, hey, the data format error, we couldn't convert legend TT to number. Well, what does that actually mean? So how do we find it? Well, here's the cool thing. This was for August 2018. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to come back to my 2017 here. I'm just going to change this to 2018. I'm now going to jump back to the sample weather transform. And in the sample weather transform, you can see that it is now using the August 2018 data, and we have an error where we couldn't convert this to a number. So what is going on with this? Well, what we can do is we can step back in the query to see what was going on. So if I go back one step, this is before the data type was actually set on this column. Notice that the value here is legend TT. Now I have no idea why this is. It's just a little bit strange here, but I've got to assume that when a value comes in with legend TT, it probably doesn't equate to a number. So I should be able to replace that with 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say right click. I'm going to replace a value, insert step, and I'm going to go and choose that legend TT, replace it with 0. And we'll say OK. There we go. Good enough. Now when I go to the change type, everything looks good. So let's drop over to weather. No little red bar up the top here. All the data looks good. So the only thing that I really need to do with this now is I could go back and say, hey, you know what? Let me change the data types. Now I'm going to change this one to text. And I'm going to change my rain to a decimal number. I can now click on the rain column and actually get an idea as to what's going on in here. So that's cool. You have to have that data type set in order to do that. Now I'm still not done though. There is something else that I need to do. And this actually sort of dictates a little bit as to why I actually went to text here, although it wasn't totally necessary. What I need is I need a good date column. And right now I've got everything spread across individual columns. Now the way that my date or my system recognizes dates is that I actually recognize them in an ISO format. So if your system is different, you may want to change the order you do these kind of things. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab year, I'm going to hold down my control column and grab month, and then I'm going to grab day third. I'm then going to go to transform, and I'm going to merge these three columns together. I'm going to use a separator of a dash, and I'm going to call this new column date. And when I do this and say OK, you'll notice that it merges them together in a year, month, day format, which I can then convert to be a date. And I now get a nice clean date for every single day of the weather forecast, along with the rain. And again, I'm going to go to the data model now. So I'm just going to reset this data type. I'm going to make this become a decimal number as well. And just like that, I've now gone and pulled the data from the web using a custom function for every single row of that table that I built through the user interface, which is my favorite way to do advanced coding, so that I can now load it to the data model. Before I do, though, I also just want to keep things nice and clean in here. So I'm going to go right click, move to group. I'm going to choose to move weather to a new group that's called data model. And I'm going to grab my sales and budget. I'm going to right click, move to group, new group. These ones here are just staging queries. That's all they are. They're not actually loading to the data model at all. Although transactions definitely is going to the data model. So I'm going to move that right in here. And now I'm going to say home. I'm going to choose to go with a close and load to. The only query that I created in this instance of Power Query was that new weather query. So I can choose to add to data model, and it will now load my weather table to the data model. It's not going to change the load destinations or anything else, so everything should be good to go there. Now, at this point, I need one more thing inside my data model in order to go and actually build things up. And that one more thing is I need a proper calendar table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use a little pattern that I actually use to build a calendar table. I'm going to start by making sure that I pull it from the weather table, because the weather table actually has data that spans over 3 years, where my sales transactions table only has 1 month. And I want to be able to get all of this data. So I'm going to go to weather. I'm going to right click on it here, and I'm going to choose to reference it. Now, inside this particular query, I'm going to just rename it really quickly. I'm going to call this one start date. And I'm going to move it into my staging queries area, because this is going to be a staging query. I'm not going to load this to the data model. And it follows a very specific pattern. I'm going to go to the date column, right click, remove other columns. So there we go. We got a removed other column step. Could have achieved this as well by going through choose columns. Would work exactly the same. I'm now going to choose to right click, remove duplicates. We'll get rid of all those. And then I will right click, or filter rather, and filter to the is earliest date. Because I've removed duplicates and filtered to is earliest, I have a single date that is the earliest date inside the entire data set. I am now going to convert this to be, if I was worried about this being the start of month or end of the month, then what I would do at this point is I would now go and say transform date, month, start of month, just to force it, just in case. I'll then set it to be a date data type. This step is very important in this pattern. And then on the cell itself, right click and drill down. If you don't reset the data type, sometimes this doesn't put in a curly brace 0, which means that it hard codes a date, which means it won't update properly in future. As it is right now, no matter what I set for my earliest table, this will always update to pull the earliest date based on that table. So it's completely dynamic. I'm now going to do the same thing for weather, but I'm going to grab my end date. So I'll go right click and reference weather. We'll rename this to end date. Drag that down here. We'll go and right click, remove other columns, right click, remove duplicates, filter this one with a date filter to is latest. We'll go and take this one, transform date, month, end of month, force it to be a date, right click and drill down. And at this point in time, I'm now going to go and choose to say home, close and load. Now, I now have my start date and end date queries. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create myself a calendar out of those two pieces. The pattern for this is actually relatively simple. You make a list that goes from these numbers, you convert it into a table and rename the first column, set it to a date. Having said that, you've got to write some custom M code to do this. Now, here's how this is going to work. I'm going to go right click. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I'll come back up to the ribbon here, up in the top here. We'll go to get data from other sources, blank query. This will create us a new blank query where we're going to type in the magic pattern that we need to do in order to build a calendar table. And that magic pattern is this, equals curly brace, number dot from, put in a space there. We're going to go from start date, and then we're going to go up to number.from. We'll choose the end date, and I'm just going to space this out. The spaces are completely optional. They just make the code a little bit more breathable. And when we hit enter, we get a nice little list of date serial numbers. We go up here, convert this to a table, and at this point, we'll just click OK and take the default options. We'll rename this to be plain old date, and change the data type to be a date. And just like that, I have a calendar table that spans from August 1st, 2017, all the way through to August 31st, 2019, because that's what was driven by my weather table. I'm going to rename this guy to be calendar. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the extra columns that I need for my calendar as well. So I'll select the date column, go to add, date, year, and year. Go back to the date column, add column, date, month. We'll choose to grab the month. I'm going to go back here, add column again, date, month, name of month. Now I prefer my month names to be shorter, so I'm going to go back here, and this time I'm not going to go to add column, extract. I'm going to go to transform, extract, and extract the first 3 characters here. So we'll say okay. There we go. Now we'll go back to date. And at this point, you really got to remember this when you're working with this stuff. It's really important to go back to add column, because if you go to transform date and then go and pick off your day, you're going to transform this column. And that's not good, because we want to keep this guy around. So we'll go to add column, date, day, and we'll choose the day of week. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to add one more column, date, day, name of day, and transform this one again to be shorter. Extract first characters, we'll extract the first 3 characters and say okay. The final step again, just want to set all those data types. So in this case, we'll grab all the columns, transform, detect data types. It seems to get them all right except for one. I always prefer to change my years to be text-based, and that way when you add them to your pivot tables, it doesn't try and sum them right off the bat because they're text. It will actually try and put them into a dimensional field. I can then take my calendar, slide it up into my data model area here, and then say home, close and load to, and we'll load it into the data model. Now the cool thing about this is that this calendar pattern is actually really repeatable. We actually have that available as one of our Power Query recipe cards that I'll give you a link to at SkillWave later on. It's also something that, to be honest with you, everything that we just did for the start date, end date, and calendar, typically what I'll do is I'll actually go and use the feature inside the Monkey Tool software that I built to just inject this right away, because it saves me doing a little bit of work. So if you're interested in that, you should check out the software there. But what I need to do now is I need to go back into my data model and fix the rest of the stuff that needs to happen in order to be able to report. So I'm going to go into Power Pivot, and we're going to go to Diagram View. And what we'll see here is we have my transactions table and my weather table, and here is my awesome looking calendar table as well. And I'm going to go and just start linking my fields together here. So we will go and link this one together, and we get a nice one-to-many relationship with the calendar being the unique entry. And we'll go again from weather to calendar. So you should always drag from your fact to your dimension tables is the best way to do this. And then I also highly recommend that you do this too, where we go and say, right click, hide from client tools, always hide the field on the many side of the relationship. It will save someone from putting the wrong field onto their pivot table and getting into a cross-filtering issue. In addition, while we're here, I'm also going to go and hide all the unaggregated fields on my fact tables as well, because I'm going to use proper DAX measures to go and actually build these things out too. So one final thing I do need to do before we actually jump out of this, I'm going to go back to the calendar table, because right now, if I put my month names on pivot tables, they'll sort alphabetically. That's not cool. I want them to sort by month number. So we'll grab month name, and we'll choose to sort the month name column by the month number and say okay. And we'll choose to sort the day name column by the day number. And where are we here? Day of week. There we go. Perfect. And we'll say okay. And at that point, the data model is now all correctly set up for what I need to do. I just need to create some measures in order to be able to actually go and make the comparisons that I actually want. So to do that, I'm going to jump over to the Power Pivot tab, and we'll go to Measures. I'll choose Manage Measures because I'm going to create a batch of them all at once here. On my transactions table, I'm going to go and make myself a sales dollar measure, which is going to be equal to the sum of my transactions sales. There we go. And we'll go and make this a number, and I might as well leave the 2 decimal places on there. Why not? So we'll say okay on that one. I'm going to choose to make myself a budget dollars measure, which is going to be the sum of the transactions budget. And again, I'm going to use number. I don't like using currency because I don't like the dollar sign in the front of everything. So that's one of the reasons why I tend to avoid it. We'll say okay. And then let me see. Oh, I know. We can never, ever put out a financial statement in front of an accountant unless you have this. We've got to have our sales dollars minus our budget dollars. Got to have your variance, which is truly is actually a difference, but that's okay. Got to have that on place. No accountant will look at your statements if it doesn't have variance. Trust me on this one. As an accountant, I'm telling you the truth. Finally, one more measure. This one I'm going to store on the weather table. This one is going to be millimeters of rain, and it is going to be equal to the sum of my rain in millimeters. I'm not really happy with that. I didn't get the table name prefaced in front of that, so let's go with this one. That's better. Always prefer to use fully qualified table name or table column names. That's important when you're doing raw aggregations. And on this one, I'm going to drop the decimal points down to 1 because we only have 1 decimal point for all of the weather measurements that we actually have for rain. And at that point, we'll say, okay, my measures are all created. So now we can actually go and figure out whether or not my penchant to blame the weather is actually accurate. So here's how this is going to work. I'm going to start right off the bat, and I'm going to create myself a very simple weather pivot. We're going to go over here, and we're going to say Insert Pivot Table, and I'm going to put it right on the existing worksheet. Notice that because I selected a blank cell, it is defaulting to the data model, which is perfect. So we'll say OK. You'll notice that because I hid all of the unaggregated columns in my data model, notice now that I actually have the nice little symbol that ties in with my values area. These are my measure tables. The only dimension that I have to work with is my calendar in this particular case, but I'm never going to accidentally put a date on one of the wrong field or pull one from the wrong table in order to link it. And this is why I hid all of the unaggregated columns as well as the foreign keys that are actually linking back to the individual dimensional table. So let's see, what can we put on here? Let's put month name on rows, and let's put the day name underneath that. So there we go. We've got lots of those. And then we'll put millimeters of rain on the actual pivot table itself. So now we can see in August, these were the actual rainfall amounts. But what I'm going to do now is break it down by year. And at this point, we start to see something that is super, super interesting. Notice that in both 2017 and 2018, in Nanaimo, British Columbia, there were 3 millimeters of rain recorded. But in 2019, which happens to be the year in question that we're analyzing, we had 20 millimeters of rain in August. So is that impactful? And the answer is, you got to think that yes, it probably is. Especially when you consider that, when did we build the budget for 2019? In the summer of 2018. And to be honest with you, we budgeted in July. So what information did we have? Well, the best information we had was to budget based on what had happened in 2017 in order to build the 2019 budget, because we had to budget really early for our organization. So, could this lead us to some challenges? How impactful is that? Yeah, okay, so what? There's 20 millimeters of rain. Is it really good enough to go and wipe out $37,000 worth of profit? Well, let's go and check this out now. So I'm going to create another individual pivot table. So we'll go individuals here, or insert pivot table on an existing worksheet. Now on this pivot table, I'm going to go and put my day name onto rows. And then I'm going to go and check the box for some things here. We'll go grab sales and budget and variance, and we'll grab the millimeters of rain as well. So this will give us a little bit of information that we actually have going on here. It does seem, when I look at these things, that there's some correlation that's going on this one here. If I look at this day here had a millimeter of rain, and it looks like it's actually had a positive sales. But we can see that some places where we had some pretty big numbers, there's some pretty big negatives along the way here as well. So it does appear there probably is some correlation, but let's dig a little bit deeper here. Let's add the date right above day name here. Oh my, that makes the pivot table look a little bit gross here. Let's change the layout a little bit too. So we're going to go to design, and I'm going to change the report layout to show in tabular form. And at this point, we can now see all the 2017 dates that don't actually have any sales. So we can fix that. I'm going to right click on my date. I'm going to add a timeline to my particular project. We'll go back to months, change it to years, and I'm going to drill into just the 2019 area for where I actually have sales data. Now that I have that in place, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a set of data bars to my rain. So I'll go over to Home, and we'll go Conditional Formatting, Data Bars, and pick up some nice blue data bars. In addition to that, I'm going to grab my variance column and go to Conditional Formatting, Data Bars, and I'm going to choose the standard green data bar right here. And at this point now, we can start to get a very, very clear picture of exactly what's happening here. Now, typically, if you look back at the budget numbers that you'd see in here, what you'd actually realize is that there's certain days of the week that are actually much higher grossing for this particular club. Namely, Thursdays are pretty big. There was an event that happened every Thursday night, which was called Men's Night. Those could be pretty impactful because there's a lot of green fee players that actually come in on those periods. This was a semi-private club, so during the regular, Monday through Thursday morning, it was mostly member play. So it wasn't really, really big on dollars coming in the door. It was more about the fact that they'd already prepaid their dues. But the actual green fee players, the ones that are bringing in money and are highly, highly weather dependent. So naturally, your green fee players, Thursday night for this particular event we had, and then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday were the biggest days. Look when we got the majority of our rain. 12.3 millimeters of rain, massive impact because it happened on a Saturday. A Thursday, the fact that there was 2.7 millimeters rain, it was that impactful, leads me very strongly to believe that it would have actually happened later in the day, or at least maybe even earlier in the day, but it significantly affected the performance of that men's night that was actually on at that point in time. Same thing here, 2.5 millimeters of rain, but it threatened enough to actually decrease the business. And just looking at these guys right here, between the 13,000 and the 25 here and the 5,200, that alone is that alone right there is $44,000. So we actually made something up in some of the other areas overall. So as it turns out, based on doing this kind of analysis, it looks that I was perfectly justified in actually going and blaming the weather in this case. The one thing you do have to be careful with, though, is that once you actually do make this claim and you go and prove it out, you probably need to come up with some other excuses because you're going to have to prove it out every single time you go and blame the weather as well. I hope you found this seminar interesting and enjoyable and that you learned some advanced Power Query tricks as well as maybe some data modeling tricks as well. If you're interested in more training on how to actually use Excel and Power Pivot and Power BI to the best effect, please come check out our courses at skillwave.training. If you're interested in getting some free help with your own solutions, you can always check us out at excelguru.ca/forums. And if you want to connect with me on social media, there's at least 3 links down the bottom here that you can actually hit, plus there's many others out there around the world as well. Thanks very much for watching.